A mechanic fixed a single mom's car. Then she asked, "Do you want to be my son's father?" The summer sun beat down on Highway 47 as Rachel's old sedan sputtered and finally rolled to a stop on the shoulder. She gripped the steering wheel and closed her eyes, fighting back tears. Not today. Please, not today. Her son Tommy sat in the back seat, his small hands clutching his soccer uniform. He had a championship game in 2 hours and they were still 30 miles from home. "Mom, is the car broken again?" Tommy asked quietly. At 8 years old, he had learned not to complain about things they couldn't afford to fix. "It'll be okay, sweetheart," Rachel said, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. She pulled out her phone. No signal, of course. She stepped out of the car, the hot wind whipping her light green dress around her legs. The road stretched empty in both directions. Rachel felt that familiar weight in her chest, the one that came from being alone, from carrying everything by herself since her husband left 3 years ago. The divorce had been brutal. Mark had walked out when Tommy was 5, saying he never wanted to be tied down. He sent a check occasionally, but his presence in Tommy's life had become nothing more than broken promises and missed birthdays. Rachel had learned to be both mother and father, working the morning shift at the diner and evening shifts at the grocery store, stitching together a life from thread that always seemed too thin. Then she heard it. The rumble of an engine. A tow truck appeared over the hill, and Rachel felt a flutter of hope. The truck pulled over and a man in his early 30s climbed out. He had kind eyes and an honest face, the type that reminded Rachel of her father before he passed. He wore a faded work shirt with the name Jake stitched above the pocket. "Looks like you could use some help," he said, wiping his hands on his work jeans. "I don't know what happened," Rachel said. "It just died. 1 minute we were fine, the next we were coasting to a stop." The man walked to her car and popped the hood. "Name's Jake. I run a shop about 10 miles back. Let me take a look." Tommy climbed out and stood beside his mother, watching as Jake examined the engine. Rachel noticed how gently Jake explained what he was checking, speaking in a way that even Tommy could understand. He pointed to different parts, using simple words like a teacher would. "Your alternator's gone," Jake finally said. "Battery's drained too. The alternator charges the battery while you drive, so when it fails, everything else follows. I can tow you to my shop, but I've got to be honest with you. The parts and labor will run about $400. Rachel's heart sank. She had maybe $50 in her account until Friday. The electricity bill was due. Tommy needed new shoes. There was never enough. "I understand," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Could you just tow us to town? I'll figure something out." Jake looked at Tommy, then back at Rachel. Something in her eyes, that mixture of pride and exhaustion and determination not to break down, reminded him of his own mother years ago. He remembered watching her count pennies at the kitchen table, remembered the way she held her head high even when the world tried to push her down. "Tell you what," Jake said, "let me tow you to the shop. We'll work out the payment later. I've got the parts in stock. No sense in you sitting out here in this heat worrying about it." Rachel shook her head. "I can't accept charity. I appreciate the offer, I really do, but I pay my own way." "It's not charity," Jake said firmly but kindly. "It's what people used to do for each other. My mama raised me to help when I can. She used to say that we're all just walking each other home, and sometimes that means stopping to help someone along the way. Besides, that boy looks like he's got somewhere important to be." Tommy looked up at his mother hopefully. "The championship game, Mom. Coach said I could start today." Rachel felt tears threatening again. She hadn't cried in front of Tommy in over a year. She wouldn't start now. Tommy had worked so hard this season, practicing in the backyard with a ball she'd found at a yard sale. This game meant everything to him. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you, but I will pay you back. Every penny." Jake smiled and nodded. "I know you will. Now let's get this car loaded up." At Jake's shop, Rachel and Tommy sat in the small waiting area while Jake worked. The place was clean but worn, filled with the honest smell of oil and hard work. Old automotive calendars hung on the walls, and a small coffee maker sat on a table with mismatched mugs. Rachel watched through the garage door as Jake moved around, her car with practiced efficiency, his movements confident and sure. Tommy pulled out his homework and started working on math problems. Rachel's chest tightened watching him. He never complained. He never asked for the things other kids had. While his classmates talked about video games and vacations, Tommy quietly did his best with what they had. He was a good boy, the best thing that had ever happened to her, and she wished desperately that she could give him more. She thought about Mark, about how he had promised to be there forever. She thought about how naive she had been to believe him. Now she knew better. The only person she could count on was herself. An hour later, Jake walked in, wiping his hands on a red shop rag. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and there was a smudge of grease on his forearm. All set, new alternator, charged battery. Checked your belts and hoses too while I was in there. She should run fine now. Rachel stood, smoothing her dress nervously. Jake, I need to be straight with you. I work 2 jobs, but money is tight. I can pay you $50 now and $50 every 2 weeks until it's paid off. I'll sign whatever you need. I'll put it in writing. Jake pulled up a chair and sat down across from her. His expression was serious but not unkind. Can I ask you something personal? What happened to Tommy's dad? Rachel stiffened, her shoulders tensing. It was a question she hated, but she had learned to answer it without emotion. He left. Said being a father wasn't what he signed up for. Said he felt trapped. He sends money sometimes, but we haven't seen him in 2 years. Jake nodded slowly, his jaw tightening slightly. My dad left too. When I was about Tommy's age, I watched my mama work herself to exhaustion trying to keep us fed and clothed. She cleaned houses during the day and waited tables at night. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. I also watched people help her when they could. A teacher who bought me school supplies and told Mama they were donated by the school. A neighbor who fixed our furnace for free in the middle of winter. A coach who waived the fees so I could play baseball and gave me his old glove, saying he didn't need it anymore. He looked at Tommy, who was pretending to do homework, but clearly listening to every word. Those people taught me something important. We're not meant to do this life alone. God didn't design us to carry everything by ourselves. We're meant to help each other, to lift each other up when the load gets too heavy. Rachel's eyes filled with tears despite her best efforts. I can't just take your help. I've worked so hard to stand on my own 2 feet, to not need anyone. You're not taking anything, Jake said gently. You're accepting it. There's a difference. Taking is selfish. Accepting is brave. It takes courage to let someone help you. He leaned forward, his voice soft but earnest. And someday when Tommy's grown and sees someone who needs help, he'll remember this moment. He'll remember that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength. That helping people doesn't make you superior, it makes you human. Rachel wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Why are you doing this? You don't even know us. Jake smiled, and for the first time Rachel noticed the warmth in his eyes. The genuine compassion there, because I wish someone had done it for my mama before she wore herself out. She died when I was 19. Heart attack. Doctor said it was from years of stress and exhaustion. His voice caught slightly. Because that boy deserves to make it to his game and feel like a regular kid for an afternoon. And because sometimes we help people not for what we get back, but for what it says about who we want to be. The silence hung between them, filled with understanding and unspoken pain in the tentative beginning of connection. There's your car, Jake said, standing and handing her the keys. All fixed up. No charge. Jake, I can't. You can, he said gently but firmly. Now get that boy to his game. And Rachel? Drive safe. Rachel stood, and without thinking, she hugged him. It was impulsive and probably inappropriate, but she couldn't help it. Jake stiffened for a moment, surprised by the sudden contact, then gently patted her back. He smelled like motor oil and soap, honest and real. As she pulled away, she looked into his eyes. Her heart was doing something strange, beating faster than it should. Do you have family, Jake? Kids of your own? No, ma'am. Never found the right person, I guess. Focused on building the business after Mama passed. Wanted to make her proud, you know? Show her that all her sacrifices meant something. Rachel glanced at Tommy, who was now standing beside them watching with curious eyes. Then back at Jake. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She was about to say something crazy, something that might sound desperate or inappropriate. But watching Jake with her son, seeing the gentleness in his eyes, feeling truly seen for the first time in years, she found her courage. Jake, she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. I know this will sound strange, and you can say no and I'll understand completely, but Tommy needs a father figure. A good man in his life to show him what kindness and integrity look like. Would you ever consider spending time with us? Maybe coming to one of his games? I'm not asking for anything romantic or complicated. Just wondering if you'd want to be part of a little boy's life who could really use someone like you." Jake stood very still, his expression unreadable. Rachel held her breath, already regretting the words. What had she been thinking? He was a stranger. A kind stranger, but still, he probably thought she was crazy or desperate or both. Then Jake looked down at Tommy and back at Rachel. His eyes were bright, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I'd be honored," he said simply. "I'd be real honored. When's the next game?" Tommy's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Saturday at 10. Can you really come?" "Wouldn't miss it for the world, buddy," Jake said. And Rachel saw him blink back tears. They made it to the championship game with 15 minutes to spare. Tommy played his heart out, and though his team lost by 1 goal, he came off the field beaming. Rachel hugged him tight, breathing in the smell of grass and sweat and childhood. Grateful for this moment, for this day, for the kindness of a stranger who had become something more. 3 months later, Jake stood on the sidelines of Tommy's soccer field, cheering louder than anyone. Rachel stood beside him, their hands not quite touching but close enough to feel the warmth between them. The autumn air was crisp and the leaves were turning gold and red. Jake had been to every game since that day on Highway 47. He'd helped Tommy with homework at the kitchen table, explaining fractions with the patience of a saint. He'd taught him how to change a tire in the driveway, showing him how to use a jack and tighten lug nuts in a star pattern. They'd gone fishing on Saturdays at Miller's Pond, sitting in comfortable silence while the sun rose over the water. And slowly, carefully, without rushing or pushing, he and Rachel had built something neither had been looking for but both desperately needed. Tommy ran off the field after scoring a goal and threw his arms around Jake. Then his mother. "Did you see? Did you see? That was the move you taught me." "I saw, buddy," Jake said, ruffling his hair with genuine pride in his voice. "That was perfect. You've been practicing." That night, as Jake said goodbye at their door like he always did, Rachel touched his arm. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For being here. For caring about him. For caring about us." Jake smiled, and Rachel noticed how different he looked now compared to that first day. More relaxed, happier. "Thank you for asking that crazy question. Best thing anyone ever asked me. You gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. A family." Rachel felt tears again, but this time they were good tears. "Would you like to stay for dinner tomorrow? I'm making pot roast." "I'd love that," Jake said softly. "I'd really love that." As Rachel closed the door and watched through the window as Jake walked to his truck, Tommy came and stood beside her. "Mom, is Jake going to be my dad?" Rachel knelt down and looked into her son's hopeful eyes. "I don't know, sweetheart. But he's a good man who cares about you very much, and that's what matters. I hope he stays forever," Tommy whispered. "Me too, baby," Rachel said, pulling him close. "Me too. Sometimes the people who fix what's broken in our lives aren't the ones we expect. Sometimes they show up on a hot summer day on a lonely stretch of highway when everything seems impossible. Sometimes they arrive in grease-stained jeans with calloused hands and kind eyes. And sometimes the greatest repairs aren't to our cars or our houses, but to our hearts and our faith in humanity. Sometimes they remind us that we don't have to do everything alone, that accepting help isn't weakness but wisdom, and that love often arrives in the most unexpected packages at exactly the moment we need it most. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still exists in this world. Subscribe for more stories about real human connection and the unexpected ways people come into our lives and change everything. Leave a comment telling us about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness, or when you helped a stranger who needed it. Your story might inspire someone else today and remind them that good people are still out there, still helping, still caring, still making the world a little bit better, one small act at a time.